Okay. So welcome today. We've got Kerry Birchill, who I met at Susanna Reay's summit. If you get a chance to go, do go, because it's a brilliant summit and there's some wonderful people who I bring onto these kind of things. So hi, Kerry. It's good to finally get this working. So how are you? How are you doing? You told me on the pre-phone you've been under the weather for a bit. You're back, and we can do this.
I'm excited to be here.
As we had a little chat beforehand, give you a little bit of a heads up. I like to start off very much at the beginning because it's one of my favorite parts of this conversation, because I love to hear the story, our origin story. I mean, I'm also a comic book story geek, so I love to hear the idea of the spider that bit Peter Parker and the little spark that turned your life from one journey to another journey. So basically, I'd love to hear that. What is your origin story? Why are you where you are and what you do?
As you say that, I'm seeing my whole life in comic strips right now. So I think the turning point for me was a discussion my partner and I had in our kitchen, where we felt like our life was just a little too comfortable and we weren't really stretched. I can't have kids. And so that, brings some freedom, obviously disappointment too. So we were kind of thinking like, what can we do to contribute more? And so I applied for a principalship in the Netherlands on a NATO base, and he applied for med school. And at 39, he started med school. I didn't get the job. And so that really turned our life inside out. And I found myself open to new experiences and new opportunities in ways that I hadn't been before. So we kind of jumped around Caribbean, the States, Canada, and in all of that, I started to work in healthcare as organizational development, and I found myself getting more and more frustrated with the unwillingness of some organizations to kind of do what needed to be done to help culture, morale. Then COVID hits and you can just sort of see all these moving pieces, right? Of just structures drive behavior. If we don't put the right things in place, chaos ensues. And I was working in healthcare at the time and was frustrated by the chaos and an unwillingness to sort of put in structures to mitigate that. So I just put my foot in the other side of the world, in the entrepreneurial consulting land, and thought I need to get in front of companies that are willing to do the work, just for my own sanity, right? I didn't want to be this frustrated all the time working in a traditional job. And so I consulted a bit on the side. We moved again, and I thought, oh, I don't know that I want to do a full-time traditional job. Let me just try this consulting thing full-time. And best decision ever. And so I've been incorporated in 2018, but went full-time on my own in mid 2021. And I love it. I work with police, fire departments, city managers, manufacturing, healthcare, education, just all over the place, but really companies and leaders that are ready to slow down, to go fast, right? Get into the nitty gritty of what's working, what isn't working. Let's put it on the table and kind of sort out the chaos.
Intriguing. I love the story, and I love again how your story is another one of those that is just by taking a leap of faith and following where things go, all kinds of opportunities open up.
Yeah, it was crazy. I'm glad we did it, but it was crazy.
Another thing I'm glad you sort of mentioned, because it was going to come up definitely when we were in the conversation, is your tips to slow down to speed up process. Where did you first come across that as a process?
I think it was in these different full-time jobs that I had over the course of medical school, moving around lots, being exposed to different leadership styles and different cultural structures and org charts and stuff. And you could just see people working harder, harder, harder. And I could just tell objectively looking in from the outside, if we just for a minute, we'd actually be a lot more productive. And so I would just start encouraging people to slow down. And then I thought, oh, but if we slow down now, we'll go fast. And then it just became the slogan of slow down to go fast, because we struggle to do that. And it seems like, especially during COVID, and I'm starting to see a hint of people letting go, but really a lot of post COVID of go faster, do the same thing we used to do, but try harder, push more, do more. And man, it's just, I can see the burnout in people and the impact, right? It just slow down. Let's get a breather. Let's think about things.
No, and I see the same thing. I think a lot of people came out of COVID thinking I've got to catch up, basically, because we've had this break. I've got to catch up, and they're then spinning really fast, and like you say,
Yeah.
What was it? My mum used to say something: less haste, more speed, or something. When it's a similar sort of thing. And you're right. Just that taking a breath, taking a pause, makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah. And you use that word spinning, which is one of my core images that I have in my business. Like we spin, right? We just go fast, and somebody has to help us pull out of that spin in order to identify the real work that needs to happen. Like too often we just respond to the spin, and we go faster, and we get sucked in that spin, and it's go, 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 go. And that spin's just problematic in 18 different ways.
Absolutely. And another thing I see people doing is, because they're moving so fast, they're reacting rather than responding to things, and that spins them into a chaos.
Yeah, just adds to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Indeed. I noticed on your LinkedIn, you spend a lot of time, done a lot of advanced degrees and a lot of learning and a lot of deep learning and a lot about understanding people. So, one of the things I'm always conscious about are people's strengths and weaknesses, like the superpowers and Kryptonite. What made you spend your time doing that kind of deep learning, and what attracted you to that in the first place?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so I spent 15 years in post-secondary education, 11 of those years full time, and worked and did all the crazy stuff on the side. And I think back to that, like of all of that, like what's the impact on my career? I do think that the PhD legitimizes some of my work. Like those are credentials that I think people recognize. But more than anything, it taught me to think better. And so I wouldn't say that I pull out a lot of my research or empirical understanding of concepts. I'm not really heady when I do my consulting work. It's more my ability to kind of come in, look at all of these moving pieces and crunch the data in my head or just in my gut around what's happening and what needs to happen as a byproduct of doing all those degrees and really training your brain to think analytically more. I think that's the real win for me. I was talking to a girlfriend the other day that I did with my PhD with. We hadn't talked in years. And I said to her, so like, do you use your PhD in your regular job? Right? I mean, because I honestly, I don't think I do. And she had the same response. She goes, I don't, but I use my thinking out of the PhD. And so that's a real gift. And I think there's just some tenacity. I mean, gosh, all of the red tape with those degrees, oh my aching head. Like, and so that you get some grit, you build some muscles, you have some tenacity. When I'm sitting alone in my office at home working by myself, I'm very extroverted. How do I stick with those things and with kind of that isolation and the parts that maybe aren't super balanced for me? Well, go through 15 years of post-secondary education and you kind of get that, stick to itness that you need. So, yeah.
Indeed, and you're right. It's the tenacity to stick to it, through the hard times, through the times when you're quiet, and research, and at the best, doesn't always go the way you want it to do, doesn't always give you the results you're looking for, and the tenacity to deal with that and carry on going is, like you say, I'm sure stands you in great stead.
Yeah, I'm glad I did it. But we have a rule in our house: no more degrees. Like we put in our time. Like
Now,
yeah,
yes, I know my wife at some stages spend way too much learning and never share. So it's at that stage where now all that learning is coming out and sharing, and like you're alluding to, in ways that aren't necessarily around the actual topic and subject matter that you spent the time
right.
learning, but in the attitude and the approach and the processes around doing that learning in the first place,
Yeah.
which sounds like it helps you quite a lot. I mean, I know you mentioned that it gives a little bit more gravitas to when you talk to people. Have you noticed that it helps open doors a little bit? So, having that in the background, or
I think it legitimizes my work. I don't know that I have opportunities because I have a PhD, but I mean, 100% of my work is referrals, Mark. So
yeah,
people refer, but I think that they see, my degrees aren't out of a Cracker Jack box, right? Like I've earned them, I've worked hard for them. Maybe I can present a little better because I've practiced for 15 years and all of that, the writing, the speaking, all of that stuff. So maybe I present well because of those things, but I don't know that the PhD has got me, you know, anymore. Now I wrote a book you can see here in the background. Writing the book was a little more streamlined for me because I'd done the dissertation and, written other empirical articles and stuff. But I don't know that I have work coming out of, oh, I want to work with someone who has a PhD, and then you go with that person. You go with the person, and then bonus that they
Yeah.
have maybe some training that might support it.
Yeah, I think you're very right. I think, the referral piece is key to describe sort of, it adds to the value of your recommendation, having someone recommend you rather than the other way around. But actually having that in the background as, adds the trust. Because I did hear someone talking recently that trust is one of those things that's a key part in the initial part of the relationship building is trusting that the person you're talking to has some level of competence in the thing that they're coming to talk to you about.
Yeah. Yeah.
The other intriguing thing about is how you moved from the education area into corporate. I mean, you sort of spun it as quickly in your origin story, but that's quite a big change.
Yeah, gosh, great questions, Mark. Yeah, so I had been fast tracked. I worked in the second largest board in Canada in education, my first career, and had been fast tracked. And so I was like very much like fitting the mold, doing what I need to do. I remember student teaching and telling the principal, I want those keys, as he had like, back in the 90s, a big thwack of keys. And so when we started med school, and I say we did med school, breaking out of that mold was crazy. And so I ended up just doing other odd jobs in education, just trying to put food on the table as we navigated all that debt and everything. And then my partner finishes school, and he says to the healthcare system that wants to hire him, I'm not signing a contract unless you find meaningful work for my partner.
Very
And he came
good.
home and told me that. And I said, stop saying that. Like, I'll find something. I've always found something. Like, you need to get a job. Like, we are, credit cards are bouncing. We're broke. Just, sign the damn contract. And he stuck to it. And so they gave me a organizational development specialist job in healthcare. I mean, way beneath my skills. But again, just happy to have a job. At the time, we'd moved from Canada to the States now. Immigration was an issue. I needed someone to sponsor my visa. Like, it all got complicated, right? And I think within that year, I got promoted 3 times, if I'm remembering right. But that was the switch, really, was him saying, I'm not signing a contract unless you find meaningful employment for, because at the time I was, we weren't sure what city or where we would
Yeah.
land. I had been chatting with a couple of recruiters, and they're saying, oh, your resume is one that I need a glass of wine with. And someone else is telling me, like, oh, this is really, out of the box. Now, fast forward to today, one of the nice things I see about COVID is there is more sort of cross-pollination between
Mm-hmm.
industries that there wasn't back sort of, 2015 when I was looking for work. But that's when we finished med school, is 2015. So yeah, so the real change into the corporate landscape was that. But I know lots of people now that have switched from like banking into healthcare, or learning and development from a school system into other areas. So I think it would be easier if I were to do it again now. But back then, it was some navigation on both of our parts to kind of make that happen.
And you're right. Generally, there is, if people can step back and can recognize the commonality, there is a lot of commonality across a lot of different industries. And I know there's a big buzzword about transferable skills that you have, but I mean, it is a big deal. And people, when they really sort of look straight forward, they're, industry and business and from one area to another area is more or less, there's a lot of stuff that you do from one to another.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And in my world of leadership, I mean, people are people. It doesn't matter what
Yeah.
the industry is. The chaos is the chaos. Whether it's a unionized environment or not, or manufacturing or, healthcare, it's, the sort of common denominators are everywhere.
And how are you finding working in the leadership area rather than in corporate as a whole? Because I know from some of my experiences working in corporate that, there is definitely a need and a want for, well, not necessarily a want, but a need for support for leaders in corporate.
Yeah, yeah, there is that need and a want. Yeah, one of my clients recently, they got the PO approved to do work for me, but HR said, we're not bringing in any outside consultants. And then he said, okay, so is HR going to provide the training then? And they said, well, no. Like, so case in point, right? The leader knows that his team needs some support, but then HR is just disconnected, or the the corporate side of the work. So it depends. And that's really, I mean, that's part of it. I've learned in my coaching and my training is to just meet people where they're at. And if they're ready to do the work, then it's going to be excellent. And if they're not ready to do the work, then love on them and leave them because they're just not ready. And that was some of my frustration when I moved into the solopreneur world is just I found myself so frustrated with the healthcare system that wasn't doing what I thought needed to happen. Now, whether or not that was right or not, I don't know. But in my mind, we were missing some opportunities to train people and help with resilience and some of the culture stuff. So yeah, there's more than enough work to go around. I think there's lots of companies that recognize the need for leadership development, recognize the value of slowing down. So I think, yeah, it's busy.
No, absolutely. There's a lot of understanding, especially in certain pockets of leaders and pockets of leadership, that what was working isn't working anymore, and they need to understand what they can do to change, and move forward. Yet there is this almost like a rolling sort of ship or a rolling sort of inertia of we've been doing it this time, or we're still doing this at a time, and there's a disconnect between you can't carry on doing what it is, but we still got to carry on, and navigating through that is, how do you find that?
Yeah, gosh, I see pretty consistently this sort of gap when it gets to around the director level of organizations and you have the VPs and the senior leaders, that the senior leaders certainly have the big strategic view. But there's a disconnect in understanding what the trench is like for those
Yeah.
director levels that lead the managers and frontline staff. And so bridging that and helping the VPs sort of slow down in their big push, right? I mean, they've got the pressure of revenue and bottom line and stakeholders and all that really big work. And to slow down and go, hey, let's understand what the trench is like for your directors and why they're asking for some of the things they're asking. Or maybe there's not even been an opportunity for the directors to ask for their needs because the VPs are sort of inaccessible in their big weight that they're carrying. So how do we bridge that gap between sort of the directors and that senior leader level? Because without that gap and understanding, both from the directors getting some of the strategic push and the senior leaders understanding what the trench is like, we're just going to miss the mark. I mean, we're going to constantly going fast and getting nowhere. Yeah.
Very much, the duck pedaling and pedaling and pedaling, and if it's going, it's
Yeah.
only going tiny space, whereas a little bit more effort and a little bit more. Yeah, indeed, very much. So on the flip side of the superpower part, which you're explaining in terms of the experience you've built up, in my experience, I see a number of people who are essentially they have a little bit of a the kryptonite. It's the thing that actually turns them off. And in my way, I spend a lot of time working with teams, creating websites and forms and stuff like that, and I hate filling out forms and stuff like that. So what would you say is that little spark that has sort of been that little niggle in the back that may have forced you to do things that you would classify as maybe your kryptonite?
Yeah, gosh, I know exactly what that is. All things details. So, like, I go on a business trip tracking the receipts in my, Excel document for taxes. What a pain in the butt. Calendar stuff, what a pain in the butt. So, Mark and I are on different time zones. I think, it took me a little bit anyways to figure out like, hey, yeah, I'm gonna have to navigate this differently because our time zones are different. Like just thinking through those
Mm.
types of details. I booked something in Eastern time zone yesterday, and it's before my workday normally starts. Well, I had the time zone the wrong direction, right? Just those ah. I mean, I'm not busy enough to have a full-time assistant, but man, I would love to just like, hey, go book this flight for me. Or, I'll pick, I'm flying in March, but I'll accidentally pick February as the month. Like those details of just like, what a pain. Yeah, I could, yeah, skip over all those details. I thrive in like messy, random, uncontrolled environments, right? So when it has to do the nitty-gritty, like taxes are just a nightmare for me.
So how do you
Yeah, I've got
navigate that? Because I know one of the things that, and to be honest, I feel you very much in that area. That is one of my niggles, and which is why I hate all this red tape of filling out forms and doing all this stuff. Even though, like I said, a lot of my corporate work was. But how do you find you navigate that? Yeah, because obviously there are things we have to do. There are details we have to
yeah,
understand.
yeah,
What's your tip
yeah,
and trick for that process?
yeah. Well, so first of all is awareness, right? So I noticed I would have like typos in some of my weekly emails that I send out, or I don't know, social media stuff. So I realized, okay, I'm not showing up as well as I want to. So I hired somebody to vet my emails, format them the right way, make sure all the fonts are the right color, make sure the fonts are all the same size, like all that stuff. So I give him a Word document and he formats it and, sends out my email. I've got another friend who was here a couple of years ago visiting during tax time, and I'm crying at the computer, so frustrated that whatever's happening is not happening, right? So she's an accountant. She's like, I can be your CFO. That's a great idea. So yesterday we were in my Excel sheet figuring out how I can add categories to my pivot table and blah, blah, blah. So I have some support doing the accounting, because it's not so much a challenge of me tracking receipts or when I've done the spending, but it's did I put in the right category? Have I tracked the date the right way? Have I, saved the receipt file in the right folder? All that kind of stuff. So she's got me on track with that. So I guess the short answer, Mark, is pulling in other people that are good at that stuff. And first of all, having the humility to go, not only do I not like doing this, I actually suck at it. And I'm going to get help, because it doesn't matter how much I try, I'm still going to suck at it. And I have, strategies in place, blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, this isn't my expertise. I need to save my energy for the messy, chaotic environment stuff that I love doing. And, just thrive where you thrive and get help where you don't. I mean, just the humility to kind of say, I'm going to let myself spend some money on that because I need it.
Indeed. And I like that the first step in that was recognizing that, is understanding and being aware of where you thrive and where you don't, and being honest to, to own up to the bits that you don't do as well as you maybe could do as other people do. And then, like you say, right, having the humility to say, maybe there are other people who can help, which I think is what people forget when, you yourself spend a lot of time in leadership teams and corporate teams and stuff like that, and you recognize that when you go in there, they have specialists in their teams. You talked about the HR; they have an HR department. As a solopreneur, or even in a small team, you don't have that. So filling that out with some other support is where where sometimes we forget that we can.
Yeah, and in all fairness too, I think it took me a while to give myself permission to accept the help. Like I pushed, wanted to be more, wanted to be better, beat myself up. Yeah. And gosh, how liberating it was when I said, you know what? I've been working at this for a while. It's not getting any better. That's okay. Like, I'm still whole, even though I'm not perfect and I'm not as good as I want to be. Right. And just the permission to say, yeah, you're worth spending some money, or you're worth asking for help. And it took me a while to get there.
Yeah, I can well understand, and also, it gives you, like, exactly what you were saying beforehand. It gives you the space to do the things that you excel at. To lean into your strength rather than to try and sticky tape over your weaknesses.
Yeah, totally.
Indeed. I'm going to go back to the main screen. We talked about your book in the background. Can you explain a little bit about the background and the tool you've got in that book?
Yeah,
because
here, am I going the wrong?
There you go.
There we go.
Screen.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay, so what's really funny is this ASKhole word is a registered trademark. I
Brilliant.
was stunned when I got it. Like, hilarious. I think it's in the Urban Dictionary. I have no idea how I got it registered.
Great name. Love the term.
So ASKhole, I'm defining it as, certainly in the Urban Dictionary, right? People who ask for advice and then disregard it. But in the leadership world, also people who ask questions when they know the answer, or they ask you to do some of their work for them because they're spinning and stressed. And so as a leader, how do you deal with ASKholes, people that are asking you things that, they're draining you, they're emotional waste, unproductive behaviors? How do you just redirect that and assume, positive intent with them? They're probably stressed and spinning, and they need your help as a leader to do the real leadership work of helping them slow down, figure out what's actually causing them that stress, and then leading them out of the ASKhole trap versus, oh, you're coming to me, you're asking me a question that I thought you knew the answer to, or you need some help with something that you could do, and I'm super busy, but I'm a good leader and I care and I want to be a servant for you, and so I'm going to do your work because you asked me to. All of those are ASKhole traps. And so what are the strategies to sort of empower employees to stop asking, so that as a leader, you have time for the real leadership work that you never really get to? And the employees are happier because they're just controlling more, and they're figuring out what's really at the bottom of their spin, and they're slowing down with their leader to sort of figure out what they need to do to thrive and be happy at work.
And I know this is one of those things that's probably difficult. If there is one tip from this book, what is what would you say was the, that little tip, the one takeaway that if they could take away that, then you'd be
Yeah.
happy?
Yeah. And certainly a tip from the book, but if I had like one tip for any leader, like quintessential skill is active listening.
Mhm.
That is just the gateway to everything. It's the gateway to people hearing how they're showing up, hearing what's really concerning them. It's the gateway to the leader slowing down, to really listening to what the employees, it's just active listening. Gosh, in our personal lives, in our professional lives, super, super hard skill. My grandma is 106. I swear she's still trying to be great at active listening. Like this is just a lifelong skill that I don't think we really ever master.
And from experience, how do you come across when there is a person who, if you just calm down, took a little bit of a beat and listened to the people who you're trying to lead, that would make a
Yeah.
big difference. What's your strategy for that kind of situation? Because
Yeah. So it's interesting, when we're really intent to listen to people, we often do what I call passive listening, right? Where they might come in and just rant or vent, or they're crying and they're upset, and so we passively listen, which is not really helpful because we're not mirroring back for that person how they're showing up. So active listening is when three different ways you can actively listen. First, just repeat the words, just verbatim, just parrot back. It feels super awkward. It's the best strategy if you're sort of new to active listening, just literally verbatim repeat back. Second strategy, not better or worse than repeating, they're all good tactics, is to paraphrase in your own words what you hear them saying. And the third strategy is to kind of pull in maybe environmental factors that you and the person understand, or things that you hear them alluding to that maybe they haven't had the courage to sort of identify yet. And so you can sort of reflect what you hear them saying, or listening between the lines, I call it, of that. So verbatim repeating, paraphrase, or reflecting what you think is going on in their head that maybe they haven't really identified.
And in my experience, that takes a little bit of courage to actually do that, because like a lot of people, listen with just nodding, yeah, and etc. But actually being, as you say, and the trick is the word active in the listening thing, is it takes a little bit of courage, because you say, especially when you talked about the first step, it can feel a bit awkward.
Yeah. And it's vulnerable because what happens if you're not listening, right? Leaders are just in their head often around like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to make them more upset. The really magic card of active listening is you don't have to be right. Because if I say Mark's asking me a question and I go, so you want me to share one tool that I think is paramount? And that's not what really Mark just asked. He was asking what a big takeaway from the book was. And so if I said, oh, so you want a tool? He'd say, no, I'm referencing the book specifically. Oh, okay. So even if I'm wrong, what's magic is the other
Mm.
person will keep talking and correct me. So it's not even about being great at active listening. It's just slowing the conversation down so we can sort of eventually get to this, shared understanding of whatever's going on.
And I think that to me sounds like it's one of the keys, is getting to that shared understanding and the rationale behind why you're trying to listen to the word. Because once you get to that shared understanding, you can both move forward rather than
Yeah.
moving in opposite directions or moving in different directions, because you don't have a shared understanding.
And people don't get to the bottom of their spin until we've had somebody listen and help me identify what is actually at the bottom. Because the sort of speed of life is so fast that I might come, to someone. Like I remember when I was in healthcare, as an example, spinning, not happy. I talked about the frustration I felt with the organization sort of not doing what I felt needed to happen. And I remember going to my leader and saying, hey, I don't feel valued. Well, that's a total spin. I mean, she could have jumped in that ASKhole trap and done a bunch of things to show how much she values me, advocated for a raise, got a different blah blah blah. When that wasn't the issue. Really, it was more about my fit in the organization. That was the issue. That was where the conversation needed to happen. Without active listening, we don't slow down. Like she could have jumped in on me not feeling valued. That would be a miss because that wasn't the real conversation that needed to happen.
My wife was a nurse, and one of the things that often happens is what they present with when they come to see a nurse or a doctor, and you will come across this, is not the thing they're there for to talk about. It's just the
Right.
presenting thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I say all the time what we ask of each other the initial ask is never the real ask. Like, shy of transactional stuff, right? I need to eat something. Okay, but that's transactional. But the transformational, the real conversations, we have to trust the vulnerability, right? We have to lean into that space. It's never, I'm scared about ABC. Can you help me? That's never what we start with.
Indeed. I love the fact that, like you said, the thing you come across is the active listening is a way of getting down to what is the real ask.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Indeed. And one of the other things when you're running a small business is both of us are sitting here in our little offices. We're talking to each other across Zoom. That's the connection we make. How do you stay connected with other people when what do you do to stay connected? I noticed you talked about your friend from who you hadn't talked to for a while came back and talked about that. So what's the way you keep yourself connected when you're sitting in a box in a room?
Frankly, most of my meetings are virtual. I do some networking events in the city I live in person, but they're few and far between. So it's really just, I guess, outside of the Zoom calls, it's how do you stay present in the Zoom call, right? Like I purposely tried to put my backdrop feeling like, we're in a living room together or an office, like you're across the desk from me, to be present, where I need to feel our energy, even though it's through a computer screen, right? Like how do we have that sort of intimacy, even though we're not in the same room together? So you've seen me drink, right? I filled up a pot of tea before I came on,
Yeah.
A casual sort of thing to do with a friend. So I have some of those strategies to connect, and I do set up reminders to meet with people or ways where there's some sort of cadence to stay in contact with people that matter.
And I love that it's part of your strategy to build that into your time. I know there's talk about sort of building walks into nature as part of your strategy and a connection to getting up and moving from your desk and all that stuff. But I love the idea that you've just mentioned of actually also building in connection moments to go and have a chat with someone or go and talk to someone. We have a regular co-working session where it is an opportunity for people to work, and they do the same sort of work they were doing in the office at home, but they've got that opportunity to connect in between the little breaks because they built it in. It's a regular moment in the week. And I love that you sort of recognize that that's key to keeping connected, keeping rooted in, the fact that it's not just work, it's people, it's connection and that kind of stuff. And I would imagine part of what you talk about leadership and that's a thing about leadership and leadership in teams is being connected with your team, not disconnected, and the active listening and also making time to spend some time with them that isn't just necessarily work, but is connected and social. And
yeah. Gosh, when I first started, I paid $2,500 to join some mastermind entrepreneur learn how to market yourself club. We'd meet with a big group, and I just found myself trying 18 different strategies all at once. It was kind of like shotgunning, everything I needed to do yesterday. It wasn't good enough, and none of it was going anywhere. And I just all this energy, kind of like that duck, right? You're going like crazy under the water and looking all put together on top and getting nowhere. So I reached out to a couple of people in that group that I thought had their act together and very bravely said, "Hey, I need an accountability group. Are you interested in meeting once a week?" And Susanna Reay was one of them. And we met, gosh, once a week for 5 or 6 years. This was even when I was still full time in my other job. I knew I needed somebody to anchor me. I wanted to see what other people's experiences were. I wanted to break down the isolation. And so we're now just this year, 2026, starting to meet every other week, but have a little more rigor in how we connect. But as an example of like regular social cadence, and we look out for each other when we have parents that pass away or friends that are going through a hard time or illness. And we also talk about the business. So those kinds of regular things. And I've never met those people in person. There's some from Scotland, England, US, Canada, like all over. But boy, they're an intimate group that is a staple and a regular cadence where we can connect and feel that safety together. So yeah, that has been a structure that's been helpful. And I block, time to chat with my mom regularly. I block time to meet with some other friends when we left the healthcare setting and moved to where we are now. So yeah, that structure drives behavior, right? If those relationships are important, I need to make sure that they're a priority in my calendar too.
Absolutely. And that it's more than it's more than just, like you say, steaming ahead, trying to learn this, that, and the other, and do lots of different strategies. It's about the human connection, and and I love the fact that you talk about that. If there's something going on in your personal life, it's important to the in the group.
No, it's been a game changer, honestly.
Good. And this podcast is very much leaning into that idea of connection, and the fact that you don't need to do it on, and to be honest, you the connection that you make and the connections you make are more and greater than just someone who you can go and talk to about your tax. But there's also quite a few people who don't understand and don't recognize that, and get themselves stuck into the rut of trying to do it all themselves. Do you come across that in terms of the leadership focus as well? Those people who don't recognize that they don't have to do it all on their own.
Yes, and they're on the burnout train, right? They're just feeling like signs of a good leader is if I support it all, do it all, work it all. Yeah, and just the quick path that is to burnout. Yeah. And ironically, when we control more of our environment, our burnout reduces. And so the irony is that as a leader, I might overcommit myself in an effort to be a good servant leader. And I always say, like, being a servant leader does not mean being a servant. Where if I ask people for help, even if they're really busy, the fact that those people can control helping, they control what they're doing, it's actually going to reduce their burnout and mine because I'm not doing it all. And the person that I'm asking for help has control over helping. And so it's kind of a win-win, but it's counterintuitive, and it's vulnerable to ask for help.
Yeah. And especially when you are in a position, I would imagine, where you're seen as someone who's doing the helping rather than asking for the help.
Right. Yeah.
And one thing that I'm intrigued to hear about is one of the things that we used to come across in corporate is things like sort of what they call it is a community of practice. Do you find that that's something that's prevalent or not prevalent in terms of the leadership sort of area? First off, do you understand what I mean when I talk about community of practice?
Yeah, I would love you to define it and how you mean it.
Okay. Community of practice is a community, hence one of the names, of people who are following the same sort of practice. So it's like you had your group of people who are doing sort of small businesses and hold themselves accountable. But it's for instance where we were in organizations, it would be, say, project managers who would get together to talk about the challenges they face as project managers, new ideas and best practices, and plus, the connection you make for someone who can help you to learn new things and move towards sort of different ways of doing things. Yeah. Is that something that you see or don't see in leaderships?
Gosh, when I was in healthcare, I developed communities of practice in a leadership academy, and people got together in groups of 10 and facilitate all that. And I thought when I launched on my own, my business is going to be full of these community of practices, right? These mastermind groups, roundtable. I played around with different language. Yeah. And it really turns out that that's not what people are biting on. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's part of, like, leadership is lonely at the top and you just sort of think you have to suck it up and, work in isolation. I'm not sure if it's the time commitment. It's just hard for people to slow down and, connect with their community of practice once a month. I don't know, but I really thought that I would just have tons of these sort of leadership academy groups, these cohorts, and I continue to offer them. I've got one going right now, but it's a couple of people and someone's dropped off, and it's just like the world's going too fast to benefit from that. And that's, to me, a prime example of slow down to go fast. You could get so much rich direction and clarity in those meetings once a month, 90 minutes, but it's just not something that people are biting on, interestingly.
I'm intrigued that you said that, because essentially, in my experience, it's the same. Some of it, I think, is, in my experience, and it would be interesting to hear whether you think the same, is a certain amount of, what we've come and face in our industry or in our area is so unique to what we do that no one else maybe understand exactly what even if they're doing the same sort of task. there's also the idea of I haven't got the time to take the time to do this. I'm in the do, and like you say, this the slow down to go fast sort of thing that isn't a premise that they have in their head. Is go fast to go fast.
Yeah. And so when teams invite me in, or training and development, that kind of stuff, then it ends up being a community of practice within that leadership team. But they've asked for the training and development. They haven't asked for the community of practice, right? But one leads to the other, and then it becomes really valuable for them. But in terms of what people engage for and what their hook is, it's then not the community of practice, which like you, find that just interesting.
No, intriguing. And I think you may have hit on the head, is that they're looking for solutions and they're looking for strategies rather than looking for a community. They're looking for a particular strategy to a particular task or a particular problem.
Yeah. And they're just focused on the top of the spin, right? I'm spinning, take care of the spin. And I sort of call it the issue fix, right? It's if we're not really understanding what's causing that issue, but we just keep fixing the issue, then burnout. We're not getting anywhere.
And I think you're right. And these people aren't silly. They're clever. They're bright people. But you do sometimes think, well, you're making the same mistake time and time again.
Yeah, and not even a mistake as much as you're just trying hard, like not getting anywhere, right? Like just pushing the boulder up the hill. If you feel like you're pushing a boulder up the hill, you're pushing a boulder up the hill. Like let's blow this boulder up. What do we need to do? Yeah.
We've sort of come across it anyhow, but like I said, one of the parts that this podcast is here for is the midweek process, the process of it's called the halftime huddle because it's around halfway through the week when you start on a Monday with great intentions. By Wednesday, the week has sort of taken on its own direction and pulling it back. Do you have any particular strategies that you use apart from the ones we've heard, which I would argue are sufficient for a lot of it in terms of having someone to connect with and that kind of stuff? Do you have any other particular tools and tips and tricks that you use to in your own life, to help and keep you focused during the week as the hump comes in?
Yeah. This might also relate to me dealing with my kryptonite, but at the beginning of the week, Monday morning, I'll write out every single appointment I have for that week. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, even though things ebb and flow and meetings get added, whatever, but it helps me frame up what I'm looking for. And then on a side column of that same sheet, I have like the big boulders that I want to work through. And so I'm, happy when I get across something off that list or do some of the big work. So that sort of keeps me on track. And on the Monday, when I look at those big boulders, I'll block out some of my schedule to kind of go, hey, I want to do these things. How do I pace that stuff? And I have some strategies in place to like pace the work, I guess is a good description. So for example, I start my day at 10. I'm camera ready at 10 a.m. except for today.
Early day today.
And part of that morning routine is I have this great dog, this big black lab. She's having a nap in the screen and porch that we have. So we go on a walk together in the morning. We do like this whole routine of just like clearing my head, getting centered, getting present. And then another crazy strategy I do is I never ever do laundry on the weekend anymore. So I'll process laundry, which is just the 5 minutes here or there, but it forces me to get up. I feel accomplished. I look forward to not doing it on my time off. And I change out of work at 5, like I'm at 10 to 5. That just helps me. So I dress up, I wear jewelry, I'm ready for work. But when work is done at 5, I change into casual clothes. I'm off. So I feel like those boundaries help me sort of, because I work in my home, doing a separation from work, and I'm now in home life, even though I'm in that same space, kind of helps me keep my sanity a bit.
Love that. And I've heard other people do a similar way of leaning into work and leaning out of work, and in terms of they start their day going for a little bit of a walk as if it was a commute, and they end the day going for a little bit of walk as if it's a commute, to sort of bookend their work period and the work time. And I like the as you say, camera ready. It's a great way to think about I'm at work.
Yeah 100%.
One other thing I love about doing this is that I get an opportunity to ask people for book recommendations, because I have and it's growing, and I will at one stage maybe do an episode all about the books that we've come across. But at the moment, I'm intrigued to understand what, if there is a book or books that you have recommended, and what they are and why.
Yeah, I always have a fiction book on the go at night. So I'm going to recommend a fiction book, which is called The Over Story. And I just admired how well it was written. I just loved the plot. I loved the ending, The Over Story. So that's a fun one. And currently I'm reading this book, 9 Lies About Work. And it's by Buckingham and Goodall. They're Harvard Business Review researchers and writers. So this is me thinking through, what some content that I can sort of spring from for emails or podcasts or posts or whatever. And I try to read things that will help me think through current challenges that my clients are facing. So I've got some, books on boundaries or the pleaser. I can see my clients just falling into that trap of like, oh yeah, you asked me to do something, I'm going to jump on that and do it. So, and the 9 Lies About Work sort of challenges some thinking about the ways we've always done things. And they've got a lot of empirical research to sort of back up what they're asserting, which is just good challenge, debate in my head around how companies do things, how I think about doing things.
I love that book. And what I love about this is a book I haven't heard of. So it's brilliant. It's even better for me. So I can chase that one down. And what I also like, I do encourage people to, whatever book they bring, it's nice to see that fiction is also part and parcel of the reason. I for a while, sort of stepped back from fiction for a while, because I had so many other books to read that I didn't find the space and time. But I've been now going back a little bit to fiction. And I think it's a wonderful way of learning about the world without actually, quotes, learning about the world. And even if it's an obscure, fantasy novel or weird novel, etc., about sort of stuff that you never walk into, it's a great way of learning and experiencing things, which is why they're we're a bit, as a what's called the book, so we're built for story. We love story, and so I love the fact that you brought a fictional book, so thank you very much for that.
Yes.
I'd love to carry on for this, and I'm conscious that we've booked a time for this, and I'd love to bring you back on again. In the meantime, where's the best place for someone to follow you and come and say hi, learn a little bit more about what you do other than what we've talked about now? Where's the best place for you to find me?
Great. So I'm on LinkedIn, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And you can check out my website at kerryburchill.com.
I'll put all this stuff in the notes, and definitely do say hi and chat with Kerry. Thank you very much for your time, and I've loved every minute, and we could spend a lot more time sharing war stories about working with leaders.
Round 2.
Absolutely. So lovely talking to you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Take care, Mark.